Hi. Are patriarchy and slavery similar? Are they defined by parallel arguments? These questions were posed to John Piper and Wayne Grudem, the editors of Recovering Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. I wanted to read you the whole of the whole of the question and answer from the book. It says in the question, aren't the arguments made to defend the exclusion of women from the pastorate today parallel to the arguments Christians made to defend slavery in the 19th century? Here is their answer. The preservation of marriage is not parallel with the persecution of The preservation of marriage is not parallel with the preservation of slavery. The existence of slavery is not rooted in any creation ordinance, but the existence of marriage is. Paul's regulations for how slaves and masters related to each other do not assume the goodness of the institution of slavery. Rather, seeds for slavery's dissolution were sown in Philemon 16, and then there's a quote, no longer a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. In Ephesians 6:9, he says, masters, do not threaten your slaves. Colossians 4:1, masters, provide your slaves what is right and fair. And 1 Timothy 6:1-2, masters are brothers. Where these seeds of equality came to full flower, the very institution of slavery would no longer be slavery. But Paul's regulations for how husbands and wives relate to each other in marriage do assume the goodness of the institution of marriage, and not only its goodness, but also its foundation in the will of the Creator from the beginning of time. Ephesians 5:31-32. Moreover, in locating the foundation of marriage in the will of God at creation, Paul does so in a way that shows that his regulations for marriage also flow from the order of creation. He quotes Genesis 2:24, they will become one flesh, and says, I am talking about Christ and the church. From this mystery, he draws out the pattern of the relationship between husband as head, on the analogy of Christ, and wife as the body or flesh, on the analogy of the church, and derives the appropriateness of the husband's head leadership and his wife's submission. Thus, Paul's regulations concerning marriage are just as rooted in the created order as in the institution itself. This is not true of slavery. Therefore, while it is true that some slave owners in the 19th century argued in ways parallel with our defense of distinct roles in marriage, the parallel was superficial and misguided. Now he says, Mary Stewart Van Leeuwen points out from 1 Timothy 6:1-6, that according to the 19th century Christian supporters of slavery, this is the quote from her, even though the institution of slavery did not go back to creation, the fact that Paul based its maintenance on a revelation from Jesus himself means that anyone wishing to abolish slavery or even improve the slaves' working conditions was defying timeless biblical norms for society. End of her quote. The problem with this argument is that Paul does not use the teaching of Jesus to maintain the institution of slavery, but to regulate the behavior of Christian slaves and masters in an institution that already existed, in part because of sin. What Jesus endorses is the kind of inner freedom and love that is willing to go the extra mile in service, even when the demand is unjust. Therefore, it is wrong to say that the words of Jesus give a foundation for slavery in the same way that creation gives a foundation for marriage. Jesus does not give any foundation for slavery, but creation gives an unshakable foundation for marriage and its complementary roles for husband and wife. Finally, if those who ask the question are concerned to avoid the mistakes of Christians who defended slavery, we must remember the real possibility that it is not we, but evangelical feminists today who resemble the 19th century defenders of slavery in the most significant way, using arguments from the Bible to justify conformity to some very strong pressures in contemporary society in favor of slavery then and feminism now. So I thought that was a good answer that they gave. And I'm going to link to, actually another point. it occurs to me. I did want to say this was something I hadn't thought about, but did you know that in the Roman Empire of Jesus' day, that 1/3 of the whole population were slaves? So why did that end? What was the power that brought slavery to an end? Something to think about. I'm linking to 2 videos. One is one that David did after reading a book by Ann Douglas, The Feminization of American Culture. And he asks the question, how did we get consumerism out of patriarchy? The second one is the 4th part of a series called Why Jesus that was prepared. So there is a PDF of it. So afterwards, if you want to get the PDF, just look up our website, onewonders.org, and you can find the whole of the tract. This is part 4. The question is, can only ignorant believe? Is Christ responsible for oppression and slavery? Thanks for watching.